Welcome aboard. Stay tuned and subscribe to Han Li's Wuxia Adventures for more thrilling content. Chapter 1651. Lu Yin had originally wanted to give Dragon Lord a treasure so that he could use his full strength, but after hearing Dragon Lord's words, he didn't say anything else. He only had 50 aura-concealing stones, which weren't even enough for half of Dragon Lord's clones. He didn't waste any more words and continued fighting. Dragon Lord was trying to think of a way to defeat Lu Yin, but Lu Yin was thinking of other things. At that moment, Ku Wei arrived, but he didn't transform into a giant. Lu Yin stopped. "Master, the sword sect has gone mad." Lu Yin frowned. "What's wrong? Do you remember Lu Tianmu of the 10 Arbiters? She wants to challenge you in the name of the sword sect," Ku Wei cried out. Lu Yin raised a brow. "Lu Tianmu wants to challenge me?" Lu Yin's first thought was that the sword sect had gone mad, but Lu Tianmu was even crazier. She knew that he was strong enough to defeat an emissary, but she still dared to challenge him. There must be something wrong with her head. When Dragon Lord heard this, he also felt that the sword sect had gone mad. Even the sword sect's elder Lien Xn, an emissary, might not be able to defeat this person. Lu Yin turned on his gadget and saw that the internet was already flooded with news of Lu Tianmu's challenge. Lu Yin could decide the time and location of the battle. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. Lu Tianmu had either gone mad, or she had made preparations. But what could make her so confident that she could defeat him? An external object? A power vessel? No, this sort of battle didn't allow the use of power vessels or external objects, so what was she relying on? Or was she stalling for time? "Master, this woman has gone mad. You don't need to do anything, little Wei can deal with her." Ku Wei was eager to fight Lu Tianmu, as he felt that he could take on one of the 10 Arbiters. Lu Yin waved for them to leave while he continued to look at the information on the internet. Not long after, Li Zimo contacted him. "Lu Tianmu took a sword from beneath the sword sect. It's a black sword that came from Lu Guai." Lu Guai. Lu Yin was shocked. He had heard of this name before. It came from Buried Weep. Her innate gift was a book that allowed her to borrow the power of the dead, such as Shield 9 and Lu Guai. She had once borrowed Lu Guai's 13 swords, which had left a deep impression on Lu Yin. Lu Guai was a very strange person in the history of the sword sect, but he could also be a very strange person. He could practice the 13 swords in less than 5 years. He was a genius, but he was stuck on the 13th sword for 20 years. Nobody knew why. Even though he had experienced love and affection, he still couldn't understand the 13th sword. In the end, no one knows exactly how he comprehended the 13th sword, but his 13th sword is the same as Lu Tianmu's. "It cannot be avoided," Li Zimo explained. "It was a very ordinary experience. If that was all he had, then Lu Guai wouldn't have been able to enter the annals of the sword sect. At most, he would have been considered one of the successors of the 13 swords, and he wouldn't have been able to bear the title of strange and demonic. I asked Master why Lu Guai's sword was suppressed beneath the sword sect, and Master only said that Lu Guai's 13 swords were very strange and similar to his own feelings. Master didn't say anything else, but he did say that Lu Guai died at the hands of someone from the sword sect," Li Zimo said solemnly. Lu Yin's expression changed. Someone from the sword sect had died at the hands of someone from the sword sect? That was strange. The sword sect valued the 13 swords greatly, and a disciple who had grasped the 13 swords had died at the hands of his own people. Welcome aboard. Stay tuned and subscribe to Han Li's Wuxia Adventures for more thrilling content. Chapter 1655. The profoundness of the heart-calming sword aims to return the heart to the sword. The ups and downs of the world, the things you see, hear and think of, everything can be revealed in this sword. This sword has been sublimated to the peak, enough to represent a person's entire life. I've always believed that the 13 swords are just sword techniques, while the heart-calming sword is a concept," said Elder Lianxin. Lu Yin was moved. Everything could be attributed to the sword? Everything one saw, heard and even thought of was the same? Wasn't this similar to the emptiness palms overlaying stacks? Lu Yin's heart was moved. "If Elder Lianxin is willing to teach me, then I'm naturally willing to learn. What conditions do you have?" Lu Yin asked with interest. Elder Lianxin looked deeply at him. "There are no conditions. Consider it my thanks for not killing Tianmo." A long sword appeared in her hand and she unsheathed it. In an instant her entire body seemed to vanish. She didn't truly vanish, she was clearly standing there, but Lu Yin couldn't sense her at all. Only her sword remained between heaven and earth. Lu Yin was stunned. Elder Lianxin's entire being was focused on the sword. It wasn't just what she saw or heard, even she herself was devoted to the sword. No wonder she said that the Serenity Sword wasn't a sword technique, but a concept. During the Sovereign Tournament, Li Zimo had fully displayed the Serenity Sword's unique characteristics. Those who understood would sigh in amazement, while those who didn't would only curse. Suddenly that sword disappeared from Lu Yin's memory as well. The tip of the sword swept past and a sword came from the west. Lu Yin's mind went on alert. Not good, this woman wants to kill me. The Serenity Sword didn't just represent a sword technique's concept. It was also a peerless sword technique for sneak attacks and assassinations. Lu Yin didn't even have time to react before the tip of the sword pierced his neck. At the same time, the star-scattered chessboard appeared beneath his feet. He almost moved away, but there was no need for that. Elder Lianxin's eyes narrowed. This was her strongest attack to date, but it still hadn't managed to injure him? Although Lu Yin hadn't been injured, he was still shocked. The sword had come too suddenly, and even with his reflexes, he had only been able to dodge after it had pierced him. If he hadn't had his armor, the sword might not have been able to kill him, but it would have severely injured his neck. Lu Yin opened his right hand and struck out with the empty palm. Elder Lianxin was struck head-on by the emptiness palm. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground in a sorry state. Even her long sword fell to the side. Her face was deathly pale and there was blood at the corner of her mouth. She helplessly looked at the tip of her sword. She had failed. Lu Yin rubbed his neck. Since he had come to the sword sect, he had naturally come prepared. Even if he had Lu Yefei's protection and Elder Jioshin's secret protection, he still had to put on his miniature armor after the battle. After all, this was the sword sect, one of the top powers in the Innerverse. He had not expected that Lu Qinjue would give up on attacking, but Elder Lianxin would. She had almost severely injured him with one strike. She was indeed worthy of being an emissary of the sword sect, an expert who had created a sword art of conception. A dignified elder of the sword sect, a powerhouse second only to the sect master, sneakily attacking a junior like me. Don't you feel ashamed? Lu Yin growled. Elder Lianxin stood up. Although the emptiness palm had injured her, it was not enough to defeat her. After all, she was a powerhouse whose power level was infinitely close to 600,000. Lu Yin did not listen to her and simply vanished. Master, let's go back. Li Zimo supported Elder Lianxin. Elder Lianxin still wanted to look for Lu Yin, but he would not appear. She knew that the news about the Sea King in the sword sect had been a foreshadowing for Lu Yin to deal with the sword sect. That news had come from the Sixth Mainland, and Lu Yin was indeed working with someone from the Sixth Mainland. No, she had to inform the sect master. After the two left, Lu Yin finally appeared. If not for Li Zimo's appearance, he would have really killed Elder Lianxin. Whatever, it didn't matter. He would just let her live for a while longer. Not long after, Lu Yin suddenly turned around and sensed a rune line attack him. It was not very powerful, but when he turned around he did not see the attack. He only saw Starsabil's rune lines. At the same time, Starsabil's rune lines extended into the sky and shot out in all directions. Lu Yin was at a loss when he saw this. Starsabil walked out with a solemn expression. Lu Yin looked at her. What was that just now? Do you remember when you were investigating Xiaji? Starsabil asked. Lu Yin's expression changed and he looked up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 16 and more. Don't tell me that Undying Yushan also has clones and that there are so many of them? Starsabil shook her head as she was at a loss. I don't know. In any case, I used the same blood to divine Undying Yushan's aura. Every direction represents one Undying Yushan. Impossible. How can there be so many clones? Lu Yin immediately denied it. Starsabil replied, I know. Aside from clones, there's also the possibility that there are auras of the same blood. He can sense these auras and even... Starsabil suddenly stopped talking. Lu Yin stared at her. She lowered her voice and said, the auras that I can divine are all extremely powerful. Even Wendy Yushan is not within my range. What are you trying to say? Every aura is closer to Undying Yushan than Wendy Yushan. Lu Yin did not understand. Closer? What did that mean? Could it be that he was related to Undying Yushan by blood? Alliance Master Lu, please don't misunderstand. Even if Undying Yushan's son was alive, he would not be within my range. These auras are close to Undying Yushan's and they could even be Undying Yushan's. I'm not sure about the specifics since I've never encountered them before. Perhaps my master knows. What about me? Why do I have the auras that you've divined? Lu Yin was puzzled. Starsabil looked deeply at Lu Yin. I don't know. Lu Yin's eyes flickered as he recalled all of his interactions with Undying Yushan. What was going on? Undying Yushan was definitely not dead, but why were there so many auras that were almost the same as his? Even Wendy Yushan was not within the range of the divination. Back then Xiaji had only had 3, and that had already been very troublesome. What had Undying Yushan done? Lu Yin felt more and more that Undying Yushan was plotting something big. This thorn was growing deeper and deeper. There was one thing that Lu Yin was certain of, and that was that Undying Yushan was far from Xiaji's level. Back then Undying Yushan had only been a hunter. Even if he had hidden his strength, it should not be impossible for him to have reached the level of a half-ancestor, right? This was just too shocking. If you want more, you can only find my master, Star Sibyl said. Lu Yin did not hesitate. Let's go to the Lesser Thousand Flow Zone. The Star Sibyl sect was not far from the Sword sect. There were still 7 days until the appointed time with Qinghua Shangren, so they had enough time to return. That day, Lu Yin left the Sword sect without mentioning that Elder Lianxin had tried to assassinate him. Wendy Yushan wanted to return to Xenu Star, so she did not travel with Lu Yin. Welcome aboard. Stay tuned and subscribe to Han Li's Wuxia Adventures for more thrilling content. Chapter 1662. Many people don't know what this is, so we have to tell them. Otherwise it'll be too dangerous. When Sansi panted heavily as he looked at the shattered power vessel in his hand. This was a power vessel that could withstand an emissary's attack, and there were only a few of them in the One family. Now one of them had been destroyed. The tearful lady raised her hand and used her star energy to write in the void about the remnant spiritual force. Anyone who entered Xiaoyu Peak would be able to see it. On the other side of Grand Harmony Peak, a total of 7 people surrounded the gray figure who was cultivating Split the Heavens. They stared at him, unable to understand what he was cultivating. Lu Xiaoqiu and Elder Li from the Sword sect were among the 7, but none of them dared to make a sound. Suddenly, a wandering cultivator arrived and saw the gray figure cultivating. He exclaimed, "That battle technique looks familiar." When he spoke, Elder Li and the others' expressions changed, and they all looked at him with murderous eyes. Damn it! The gray figure who was cultivating Split the Heavens was alarmed, and he slashed horizontally at the wandering cultivator who had spoken. The wandering cultivator didn't even have time to react before his head fell off and he died. Elder Li immediately attacked the gray figure. He was a powerhouse with a power level of over 400,000, and this gray figure was at most an enlighter, so he wasn't afraid of him. Lu Xiaoqiu and the others didn't care, especially Ling Gong. She wasn't even afraid of a one-on-one fight. Even if this person was someone from ancient times, she wouldn't be afraid of anyone in the same generation. Gray Shadow was extremely powerful. Even with Elder Li's combat power of over 400,000, he could not suppress him, especially with the Split the Heavens combat skill. The black line almost severed Elder Li's arm. Elder Li's killing sword technique was useless against Gray Shadow. Even the blood-red longsword shattered. He suddenly felt like he was facing Lu Yin. When Lu Yin had first visited the Sword sect, they had briefly clashed, and the feeling of being challenged by someone who was a realm breaker was not good. The gray figure raised a hand and pressed down with a single palm. Cloudfall. Elder Li was frozen and couldn't move. The gray figure raised his hand again and used Split the Heavens again. Ling Gong suddenly intervened and rescued Elder Li. "Let's retreat first or we won't be able to see him cultivate." Elder Li thought about it and retreated from Grand Harmony Peak with Lu Xiaoqiu and the others. There was no one left on Grand Harmony Peak, so the gray figure continued the same process. And the others could go there again. The Spirit Palace was quite interested in the heaven-splitting combat technique. In the valley, there were also people watching the gray shadow cultivate his spiritual force. Out of all the spiritual force remaining in the ruins of the frigid immortal sect, the gray shadow here was the most valuable. He had created thousands of battle techniques for the Day-Night clan, and this had attracted many people's interest. Unfortunately, there were still people who had alarmed the gray shadow, and many independent cultivators had been killed by his spiritual force. The place with the most deaths was Xing Mountain. No matter who it was, as long as they stepped into Xing Mountain, they would never be able to leave. The battle on Xing Mountain involved the clash between 2 ancestors, and there were 3 of them. Even Elder Jioshan was severely injured. The ruins of the cold immortal sect were huge, but not all of it was there. Part of it had been brought into the starry sky of trees. There was a great hall in the distance, which used to be the meeting hall of the frigid immortal sect. The atmosphere in the hall was strange. A few gray shadows sat on the chairs calmly. One of them had his hands behind his back and was talking about something. The rest of the gray shadows nodded from time to time. It was obvious that they were discussing something. Lu Yefei and Night King Dijiang were seated below these gray shadows. The three of them didn't dare to say a single word, and they didn't even dare to move. They just sat there stiffly as they waited for the gray shadows to begin their discussion. This was the frigid immortal sect's meeting hall, and those who could come here to discuss matters were all members of the frigid immortal sect. They were definitely the upper echelons and they weren't stupid. Lu Yefei in particular was well aware of the frigid immortal sect's terrifying strength. Those who were qualified to discuss matters in such a place definitely had a power level of over 1,000,000, and there might even be a half-ancestor among them. They were afraid that they would be discovered if they moved. Night King Dijiang also understood that even if the three of them had a grudge against each other, they could only sit there calmly. At the foot of Xing Mountain, a blood-stained cloth floated down. Lu Yin saw it and he looked up at the peak. Another person had died and he didn't know how many had died. Anyone who came to Xing Mountain would die without a doubt. This person was lucky as he still had a piece of cloth left behind, but the others probably didn't even have a corpse. This was probably where the blood-stained ground at the peak of Xing Mountain had come from. This place was simply hell. A few more days passed and on this day Lu Yin actually saw a cultivator. They were at the foot of Xing Mountain, and their backs were facing the peak. Anyone who entered the frigid immortal sect's ruins from the outside world would usually go to the peak before coming to this place. However, this cultivator had done the exact opposite and had circled around Xing Mountain before turning back. This was how he had managed to avoid the terrifying aftershocks of the clash between progenitors and survived to see Lu Yin. The cultivator's expression changed the moment he saw Lu Yin, and he tried to run away, but Lu Yin caught him and dragged him back. "Brother, why are you running?" "I don't eat people," Lu Yin laughed. The cultivator looked at Lu Yin timidly and stuttered, "Lu, Alliance Master Lu, I don't mean to steal your opportunity. I'm just passing by." "Passing by? Passing by the Day-Night clan? You're quite brave," Lu Yin teased. The cultivator's mouth twitched. Alliance Master Lu, can you let me go?" Lu Yin asked, "How did you get in?" "I walked in." "Nonsense. I'm asking if there were any abnormalities on Xing Mountain from where you came into where I am." "No." Lu Yin understood. It seemed that the clash between progenitors had only occurred at the peak, and nothing had happened at the foot of the mountain. This meant that he could leave without waiting for Elder Jioshin. "What's the situation outside? How many people have come in?" He should be able to. "I know you don't believe me, but you can just ask. Why are you afraid of wasting so much time?" Elder Jioshin asked as he continued to treat Lu Yin. The second Night King sneered. "There's no need to waste time. Die." At that moment, Lu Yin finally regained consciousness. When he saw the second Night King, he subconsciously used the Day-Night's tribute. This was the Day-Night clan's most powerful spiritual force battle technique, and it far surpassed the Night King's immortal finger. When the Day-Night's tribute appeared, the second Night King's expression changed and he hurriedly stopped. He stared at Lu Yin. "Brat, how do you know the Day-Night's tribute?" Lu Yin was panting heavily, and his head felt like it was about to split open. He still hadn't figured out what was going on, and his memory was still stuck at the moment when he had blocked the second Night King's attack. At that time he had wanted to block the second Night King's attack and immediately use the Day-Night's tribute, but he hadn't expected to be beaten into a daze. "Brat, speak," Elder Jioshin said. Only then did Lu Yin see the situation clearly. There were a total of 10 spiritual force spheres surrounding him, and his face paled. This scene was not unfamiliar to him. Next to the frozen immortal pond, 10 spiritual force spheres had formed a sourcebox array that had severely injured Elder Jioshin. That was why Elder Jioshin had been unable to resist the second Night King. He didn't wait for Whitewater's agreement before waving his hand, causing his star energy to spread out and draw the dozens of glowing objects over. Whitewater looked on helplessly as she had no other choice. Soon after, the glowing objects approached, and Lu Yin unceremoniously collected all of them. There were 14 grains in total. "Miss Whitewater, you probably don't need fates, and right?" "I won't be polite," Lu Yin said with a smile. Whitewater fell silent. What could she say? This power vessel isn't bad. It should be used to trap people and it's probably quite powerful. Miss Whitewater, you won't need it with your current strength, so I'll take it, ha. This is also a power vessel. Not bad, not bad. Miss Whitewater, who do you think this is suitable for? Me? Then I'm sorry. Right, Miss Whitewater, I have something good here. Your daughter Bai Xiaodai is about to embark on the path of cultivation, right? I'll give this six-fold formcast model to her. Whitewater took the formcast model and her breathing quickened. Formcast models were a cultivation method unique to the Fifth Mainland, and they were extremely precious. You're giving this to me? Lu Yin waved his hand. I'll give it to Xiaodai. I like that child very much. Whitewater looked at Lu Yin with a complicated expression. Was it worth it to exchange a power vessel from the frigid immortal sect's treasury for a six-fold formcast model? She couldn't say for sure, but anything left behind by her ancestors was definitely not bad. The power vessel she had just seen was enough to deal with an ordinary emissary, and the rest should be similar as well. However, she couldn't take back anything that had fallen into Lu Yin's hands. A six-fold formcast model was very suitable for Xiaodai. Thank you, Alliance Master Lu. Lu Yin was satisfied. How many people in the Fifth Mainland had a six-fold formcast model? To Whitewater, it was more useful than a power vessel, and he would do his best to not let her suffer any losses. What is this? Lu Yin asked as he looked at the jade in his hand. Whitewater was confused. Can I take a look? Lu Yin handed it over. Whitewater looked at it and hesitated. Lu Yin pursed his lips. He knew that she was worried, but he couldn't hide it from her. What is it? Whitewater lowered her voice. The Wind God Battle Technique. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. The frigid immortal sect's Wind God Battle Technique? Whitewater nodded and handed the jade to Lu Yin. The Wind God Battle Technique was one of the frigid immortal sect's inherited battle techniques, and it was comparable to the Wang family's four ultimates. It was an extremely powerful battle technique, and Lu Yin hadn't expected that the frigid immortal sect would leave it here. The Wind God Battle Technique was very tempting to anyone. Any cultivator who learned it would experience a metamorphosis in their strength, and they would instantly become an absolute expert. However, Lu Yin didn't need it as he had plenty of battle techniques. Even if the Sixth Mainland's three progenitors were here, Lu Yin did not believe that they would be able to see through Progenitor Hui's seal. Progenitor Hui was a terrifying figure who had plotted against the Sixth Mainland and the Eternals. Even though no one knew how strong he was, just the fact that he had schemed against the Sixth Mainland and the everlasting race was enough to make anyone wary. Martial power and wisdom. If Ancestor Qin represented martial power, then Ancestor Hui represented wisdom. You really don't know about the seal here? Lu Yin asked Bai Shui. Bai Shui solemnly replied, I swear that I definitely don't know. Lu Yin looked away as he trusted Bai Shui. How could she possibly know about Progenitor Hui's seal? Even the progenitor who had left her those external items might not have known about it. The frigid immortal sect only had one progenitor, and only that progenitor had the qualifications to know about it. How could a progenitor leave such things behind for Bai Shui and the others? Let's go. This place can't be exposed, the head referee said coldly. Lu Yin agreed. If Progenitor Hui had sealed this place, then it was necessary to seal it. This place could not be exposed and the everlasting race could not discover it. It didn't take long for the three of them to reach the bottom of the frigid immortal pond. Lu Yin tossed the water over and smiled at the head judge. Senior brother, I brought you something good from the hidden trove. He then took out a bottle of Star Source elixir. Ku Wei's strength had risen too quickly, to the point that it was inconceivable. He was now able to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Even though he was from the Seven Courts Ku family, the Ku family's successor was Ku Lei, not Ku Wei. Ku Wei was delighted and he proudly raised his head. He had long since wanted to compete with these former 10 arbiters. Although it had been a little late, he had still managed to make it in time. It was all thanks to Progenitor Chen's blood that he had undergone a transformation. Otherwise, he definitely would not have been able to fight against these people. Brother Ku, you heard the head judge's words. The frigid immortal sect's ruins belong to everyone and cannot be monopolized. You sent a giant to guard the pool and prevent others from approaching, which isn't very good, Wen Sansi said politely. At this point, everyone in the Wen family was very courteous to the Great Eastern Alliance. Ku Wei sneered. The frigid immortal sect's ruins cannot be monopolized, and we didn't monopolize them either. Didn't you guys come in? As for the pool? Everyone stared at Ku Wei. Ku Wei grinned. That's for my future master's wife to bathe in. What are you guys doing there? Bullshit. An enlighter cultivator subconsciously cursed. Ku Wei's eyes widened as he raised his hand and lightly flicked his finger. With his current giant strength, even a light flick of his finger was extremely powerful. That cultivator was directly sent flying, and no one cared about his fate.